sir. We've done what you told us. We brought you the broomstick of the Wicked Witch of the West. We melted her.
Oh, you liquidated her, eh? Very resourceful.
Yes, sir. So we'd like you to keep your promise to us, if you please, sir.
Not so fast. Not so fast. I'll have to give the matter a little thought. Go away and come back tomorrow.
Tomorrow? Oh, but I want to go home now.
You've had plenty of time already.
Yeah. Do not arouse the wrath of the great and powerful Oz. I said come back tomorrow.
If you were really great and powerful, you'd keep your promises.
Do you presume to criticize the great Oz? You ungrateful creatures! Think yourselves lucky that I'm giving you audience tomorrow instead of 20 years from now.
Oh.
The great Oz has spoken.
Oh.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. The great Oz has spoken.
Who are you?
Oh, I am the great and powerful Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz. You know, the wizard had ulterior motives. If you know very much about the story, at least, the characters you just saw there were like, what? You know, we did what you asked us to do. We thought you were helping us, but he was really just helping himself. He had ulterior motives, and there was somebody hiding behind a curtain, not who he appeared to be. As we get older, you know, we kind of get wise to this stuff. I remember watching that movie, though, and as a kid thinking, my mind was blown. What? The wizard was a guy behind a curtain? It was like, whoa, you know, but as we look at it as adults, we're like, yeah, I saw that coming. Come on, you know. There's always explanation. There's always, you know, we become more skeptical because of what we've experienced in life. What we've experienced has caused us to see that sometimes people lie, sometimes people have ulterior motives, and so you need to maybe look a little deeper at situations that look too good to be true, right? We all know that. So ulterior motives are defined as a secret reason. Like there's a hidden secret agenda or a reason behind why someone is doing something. It could be to help you or help someone, but it's an ulterior motive contained within that. And I bring this up because church is one of those things that people wonder if there's ulterior motives all the time. All the time. Church is one of the biggest targets when it comes to mistrust. And let's look at church from an outsider's perspective. From an outsider's perspective, if you're on the outside looking in, you know, you're wondering, what is the church's real motive? Like, what's the agenda? What are they trying to accomplish? What do they want from me? You know, do they just want power and control, like the Pope kind of a situation? Like, wow, there's a lot of power there going on. Do they just want my money? Is that what it's about? You know, they're just trying to get stuff for themselves. And unfortunately, suspicions are fueled by the stories that we hear and see all around us of leaders, people who make bad choices. It could be a pastor who buys a $20 million jet because he wants to, you know, get to places quicker when he's speaking, or it could be a priest that was tried and convicted of horrific crimes. These stories just cause us to wonder, and it only fuels our suspicion and our curiosity about, is there an ulterior motive behind these people that start churches or that lead churches? And if we're honest, even us church-going folks, like ones that are here today, or for those of you watching online, if you consider yourself someone who goes to church, well, then even we start to wonder sometimes. Like, because of what we hear and what we see. It tempts us, the temptation is to go Han Solo. In other words, I'm not, you know, Desperado, if you want to go further back. In other words, I'm going to do it my own way. I'm not going to, you know, we'll just have church at home. It's a temptation to let's just avoid the whole institutionalized thing called church, and let's just have our own brand of authentic Christianity. It's just God and me, and we're working things out together. It's a temptation. But if you've experienced church when it's doing things right, and church leaders, when they do things right, you realize, no, there is something important about gathering together, and there's a good reason to do that. But for those who have experienced church on the negative side, they are skeptical. And pastors, don't even get me started about pastors. Oh my gosh, these guys are really sneaky. They must have ulterior motives. I mean, think about it. Who would do what they do for what they get in pay and stuff? It's like, what in the world? And I think back to a story when I was in youth group, and we had a particular youth night where all the youth had just gotten back from like a weekend getaway. You may have heard of it, called Bambi Lake. I don't know, maybe not, but it was a Southern Baptist retreat that our youth group had gone to with lots of other youth groups. Lots of fun stuff going on. It was the winter time, so there was tubing and there was speakers, and these speakers brought a message that just hit us really hard one night, and all the kids went forward and rededicated their lives to God. So we come back from this, ready to charge hell with squirt guns. We're just like, yes, Jesus is the way. And so we're like, I don't care who hears me. I'm saying it. I'm going to shout on the rooftops. So we come back to our church that Sunday night, and the church is like, wow, look what happened. And it was an amazing night. Kids sharing testimonies of what God was doing in their lives. And after all that was said and done, all of us youth are together having like a little huddle before the night finished. And one of them says, I can't hold it any longer. I've got to tell you what's going on. And she proceeds to tell us about an affair that her father was having with someone in the church. And by the way, her father was the pastor. And it was like, what? And it just changed everything for me. From there, the adults started hearing something was going on, and trickles out, and that's how the news got out about what had happened in that church. And of course, at first you hope that it's not true. You hope, please don't let it be true. But it turned out to be true. And it turned out that pastor confessed to it and stepped away from the ministry and said, okay, I'm not going to do this. But as a teenager, I said to myself, is there really any such thing as an authentic leader who is doing it for the right reasons? And it fueled my skepticism that was already a little bit there, but I found myself searching for a real church, a real pastor where this kind of stuff didn't happen, where there was no ulterior motive, so there was nothing happening in secret. So I get it. If you don't trust people as quickly, I've been there, and I get that. And I wondered, are there any Mother Teresas left in the world? Because we hear about Mother Teresa, it's like, whoa, there's an amazing testimony. There's someone who did it for the right reasons, asking nothing in return. She's inspirational. She's someone we can look up to. She's authentic. So the question that we all wonder and that we need to know is, how can we know if a pastor or a priest or a church is trustworthy? That's the magic $1 million question. That's the elephant in the room that people wonder. People that don't go to church wonder about this. And even, if we're honest, when we go to church, we even wonder sometimes, how do I really, really know? Because maybe we've been in a situation where the curtain got pulled back and we found out what was really going on. But good churches and good pastors do exist. I promise you. This is weird to talk about because I am a pastor. And so here I am talking about like, hey, trust me. But I promise to be objective in what I talk about today with you guys. So if you're considering a church, watching online, thinking about it, I want to give you a decoder ring today. You know what decoder rings are, right? You could use them to figure something out. It's not really a decoder ring, but I'm going to give you some great questions to ask to decipher this question, because it's an important question, and I think we all wonder about it. So let's get right to it. I did an internet search. Nothing news there. But I did an internet search for churches in Birch Run area. I'm like, I wonder what will come up with this. How many churches? To my surprise, I came up with a list of 500 churches within a 30-minute radius of where we are right now.
Wow.
Who would have thought, right?
Are they all legit?
And at first, I don't know. I looked through it. I'm like,
500. I don't.
Okay, is this really? But no, there really are. Yeah. And because within a 30-minute drive, mind you, so we're encompassing Flint, we're encompassing parts of Saginaw,
Right.
so on. But 500 churches. So it's not that our region is starving for a choice in churches. There's so many choices. And Silver Creek, why do we need one more? I mean, that's a great question that I think begs to be answered. What sets us apart from other churches in mid-Michigan? So before we answer that, we have to do a little history on the term church. And we're not going to go back too far. We're just going to go back 40 years. Go back to the 1980s, one of my favorite eras. In the 1980s, there was two terms coined for churches back then. Traditional or contemporary. And for those of you that remember, that's when contemporary music began making its debut on the world of Christian music. You know, artists like Amy Grant, Michael W. Smith were popular. That started becoming the new thing. But this church was emerging out of what was thought as traditional, and they called it contemporary. Now, in a traditional church, you would see a piano or an organ, but just a piano or an organ. And usually it had one guy singing and he usually stood behind the pulpit. Yeah, here, you can toss that right here, thanks. You read my mind. He's usually, one guy singing with the piano or the organ. It's usually an outdated building, a building that was built like 50 or more years ago. This is in the 80s. After the songs and announcements, they would dismiss the children who were all together with us for the beginning of it. It was not unusual for kids and parents to sit together with their parents during service.
Mm-hmm.
Something I remember from traditional churches is typically, if they had meetings, the meetings revolved around important topics like what color carpet should we have in the main sanctuary, and how are we going to pay the bills this month? Things like that. It was usually a lot of older people arguing about what seemed like not that important things, looking at it from a young person's perspective. And if you ask somebody, why do you go to church, they would tell you because it's the right thing to do. That's why they went to church there. It was just the right thing to do. They memorized Bible verses. They attended Sunday school, which happened an hour before church. And then once every 3 to 5 years, they would have revival tent meetings held on the property. The unspoken goal of the traditional church was don't make God angry. I mean, that was the underlying goal. Look, it's like if you want to cut to the chase, how do you get to heaven? How do you survive? Just don't make him angry. Okay? And then we're all set. And that's how everything conducted lifestyles. That's how it conducted what they did. They don't miss a Sunday because you don't want to make God angry. And that's how life was for a traditional church or someone that went to a traditional church. So then the contemporary churches start to happen. Contemporary churches, they had guitars, drums. They had drama skits, mission teams that went to places around the world or even in other states and countries. They had newer buildings that were updated and designed with a little bit of a modern flair. They had a children's ministry with people who were dedicated to create environments and places for children to go and learn at their level according to their age group. Their youth ministries were bigger. They were bigger and better because they had a full-time youth pastor who was his whole job was just to build that youth group. So sometimes youth groups were as big as the church itself. They exuded confidence in everything they did, excellence in everything that they did. The motto for them was the bigger the church, the healthier the church. You had a mix of Bible studies, age groups, small groups, and for the really, really successful ones, they started building fitness centers and gyms attached to the church property where a person could do life at church. The unspoken goal for those church members was to live life as much as you can on the church property. In other words, the world revolves around the church. The church is the center of life. Everything happened there. If it was Halloween, they would have a night for you and your families to go there, like it was a safe haven away from what was going on out in the world, the craziness. That's what took place. Everything was happening there. And that had its, there was good points in both of these. Really good points in both of these. But as times have moved on, there's two new terms that began to emerge as we approach the year 2000. And these two new terms we still have today, and they're attractional and missional. Now, for attractional, an example would be like if you've ever heard of Saddleback Church, Willow Creek Church. These are two of the trailblazers in the world of attractional churches. Seeker-sensitive was a term used loosely. Sometimes that term can be positive or negative depending on how you look at it. And here's what seeker-sensitive means. It means they look at everything the church does through the lens of, how does this feel to an outsider? How does this look to an outsider? In other words, let's because the traditional churches had a reputation for being so, stuck in what was important to them that they were neglecting and ignoring the world dying around them. So they thought, how can we focus more on that? So let's evaluate everything we say and do so that we can make the person feel as comfortable as possible to at least get in the door, at least come in and sit down and hear what we got to say. So it became their intention and their goal to think of it as having guests over for dinner as a Sunday morning service, to be on their best behavior, to put their best foot forward, to present a positive experience for a visitor. But they also realized that there was phrases and words that we used in the Christian world that sometimes people don't understand. Most churches, even if we're honest ourselves, are guilty of speaking Christianese once in a while. We'll say things like, are we going to get together in fellowship? And to someone who doesn't know what fellowship means, like, what does fellowship mean? Or we'll say, I was washed by the blood. And they're like, that's a scary thought altogether. You talk about things like that. The whole idea of communion can freak people out. But we all have a version of Christianese, if we're honest. So let's look at this video clip, because I think it's a funny way to admit that.
I think he's backsliding. I think I saw him drink.
Yeah, but in moderation.
I just wasn't seeing much fruit. He's going down a slippery slope. How's your heart, man? How's your heart? I'm just such a words guy.
It was a total God thing. I'm blessed. I've been working on my testimony.
Is that secular music?
We're opening with a secular song tonight.
He's a believer. I think he's saved.
I just pray you would give him traveling mercies. Pray for all Tyler's unspokens.
Echo that.
Just really like to echo Tyler's prayer, Father. I echo that echo of my echo of his echo.
I really feel like I'm being released from this,
I'm trying to be relevant. I'm just trying to be in the world, not of it.
Dude, he brought it.
He brought the word. That service last night rocked me.
They're pretty purpose-driven.
Yeah, it's seeker. Don't they do seeker service there?
I feel like he's gotten really watered down.
I don't feel like he really teaches the word.
There's just not enough meat, Let's invite some dudes over and fellowship tonight. We're gonna have a sweet time of fellowshipping tonight.
Dude, we had the sickest fellowship last night. We're going to Extreme.
Velocity.
Ignite.
Yeah, I'm going to Ignite.
The Edge.
The Dive.
The Bridge. The Ramp.
Fire.
Courageous. Passion. Echo. Reverb.
Noise.
Velocity. Drive.
Elevate.
Radiate.
722.
635.
419.
Orange.
Blue.
Yellow. Green. Clear. Neon.
Catalyst conference this year.
I don't do that because I feel like it ruins my witness.
Been struggling with that.
I'm really wrestling with that. I'm wrestling with a doubt.
Need someone to hold me accountable.
I'm really trying to be intentional with her. I'm pursuing her for sure. I'm trying to guard her heart.
Dang it.
Crap.
Shoot. Sheesh.
Frick.
Darn it. What the H?
Holy crap.
Son of a bee sting.
Dude, he's really teeing me off. I'm gonna kick his A.
Are you S-ing me right now?
Not cool. I find that offensive.
So, if we're honest with ourselves, we have sometimes a bit of a language gap. So we got to be careful. We got to be thoughtful of the fact that, what are we doing? So I agree that we should ruthlessly evaluate our actions and our language. It's important to watch what we say and what we do, to not ever become too insider focused that we forget about the outside world around us that's needing Jesus Christ. Now, the problem becomes clear when your church is spending more time talking about what makes the members feel more comfortable within service than what makes the guests feel more comfortable. We could become unaware of our unfriendliness, our selfishness that we're oblivious to that's happening around us. Attractional churches believe Sunday is the most important day of the week, that everything that happens on Sunday is like that Super Bowl Sunday. It's the most important day. Do it with excellence. The best, they'll have the best quality speakers. the best microphones, fog machines, laser lights, projectors. They look at Disney or the Taylor Swift concerts as their evaluation tool of, what do we need to do next to make this the biggest, the best thing. They want to present a service with excellence, and that's not entirely a bad thing. At the heart of it, it's not a bad thing to want to give God's should be the best. But if you find that your budget is putting more money towards the decor and the fog machines and the special effects than it is the funding of local ministry to people in the community, you need to take a closer look under the hood of that church. Because often in attractional models, that's the focus. The focus is just keeping the machine alive, so to speak. And often in attractional models, it's very attractive or famous people that are in charge. That's often called a personality-driven church. In a personality-driven church, if you go to the website, their faces are splashed all over the website and the web pages. They and their attractive spouse are in full color. If you see billboards, they have their faces, pictures on the billboards. They're often referred to as the first lady or the president almost, the king, queen of the church. They're revered as royalty almost, like everyone's to almost serve them at a higher degree than anyone else. And in those models, in those churches, if the pastor ever quit, they typically fall apart. Or if the pastor retires and tries to hand it off to somebody else, it fails and doesn't work because it was so reliant upon that person being the man or the pastor of all pastors that no one could ever conceive someone else doing it. It's not a team-driven ministry. It's a singular, one-person-driven ministry. Now, these kinds of pastors will often layer themselves between the public and themselves. They'll make it where it's very difficult to see them. You'll have a very hard time making appointments with them. You'll have a very hard time approaching them. And if you find that your pastor hardly ever attends the outreaches that your church puts on, or they don't show up at the events they do, you may want to wonder about that. I caution you in choosing a church where the pastor does this because Jesus Christ taught us. Jesus Christ lived it for us, the life that the pastor and the leader are to be servant leaders. So that's the first thing you look for. That's the question to ask. Are they a servant leader? Do they do it or do they just talk about it? Now, attractional has lots of good points, but it's also got concerning points as well. So next we'll talk about missional. Now in a missional church, the goal is for the church members to do as much as possible outside of the walls of the church. A missional church prefers its members to join clubs that already exist rather than create their own Christian clubs within the church. It encourages people to get into the community, to do more things outside. For instance, a church could start their own softball team and play other churches in softball all summer long, or they can encourage their members to join softball teams that are already here in the town and rub shoulders with people that don't know Christ. Let them see the light in you, and maybe we could spread Christ around this community, this world a little bit more. Church can either start a small group or a Bible study and just invite people from the church, or they can encourage the people in the church to lead a Bible study at work. Have a popular book or a study with some friends that don't go to church and talk about that book or the Bible, of course. But the idea is to do life and to spend time with people outside the walls of the church. And the point is to be missional. It's what Jesus Christ did. So as you can tell, I lean a little more heavily on the missional side when it comes to which one are us. It's go to the community rather than wait for the community to come to us. Now, on the negative side, missional churches have to be careful because they have a reputation for being a little judgmental to other churches that aren't doing it as well as they are, or aren't doing it right. And so they have to be careful of that. Humility is an important virtue for a church that's going to undergo this model. Now, Silver Creek Church is a mix of both. You may have already figured that out. We're a mix of everything that I've talked about. We're intentional in planning the Sunday morning service, but we always keep the guest in mind. how's this going to look and feel for someone that's never been here before? I never want you guys to feel torn, conflicted about inviting someone to come to church here because you think they may not understand us or get us. I never want to be that church. I want to be the church where you can say, I can invite anybody here, and I think that they'll fit in. Now, they may not agree with or believe everything we believe, but at least our church gives them room to not feel like an outsider. They can feel like somebody who can come in and experience it. Now, we achieve this by being very intentional about our communication and our planning. I invite opinions and feedback as the pastor. I invite it. If you've ever got a concern, I want to hear about it. And it's not just words, I really mean that. Because that's how I make sure that I'm accountable. I don't ever want us to become unrelatable to unchurched members in our community. And to do this, it takes inviting accountability, not allowing or tolerating accountability. I've seen that done before. It's inviting accountability. It's a whole different thing. It means that I am asking for it. I'm inviting it. So you want to attend a church that ensures accountability, starting at the top with the pastor. The pastor should be accountable to a board of members. And we have, at Silver Creek Church, a church board, and I'm accountable to them. If they want to, they could outvote me. They could say no to what my idea is. If they want to, they could vote me out and say somebody else is going to take over. But that's what a good church should have to make sure that we stay on track. And a good church should ensure they're not insider focused. That's something we've got to constantly look at because we automatically will slide that direction without thinking about it. If you're not trying not to, you will do it. You have to intentionally be trying not to do it, to not do it, because we're human. It's just what we do. We're naturally going to think of, well, this is what I like. If Pastor Ben asks me, hey, what do you think we should do? What do you think? I'm going to automatically answer, well, this is what I like. It's just automatic. So it's important to answer what we like, but also, well, this is what I like, but I wonder if this is what my neighbor would like too. So let's think about both and. Now, we've got to look at the scripture in this too, because the Apostle Paul, he writes a letter to a church that I think we're going to relate with. This is to a town called Colossae. Now, Colossae, they were a thriving textile manufacturing community. Like they built fine garments, everything around textiles. They imported, exported. They were successful. But at the time that Paul's writing this letter to them, their success is at a downturn. In other words, they're not at the top pinnacle, the heyday of their careers. That's happened a long time ago. Now things have dwindled down and they're not as successful. It's a lot like Central Michigan. I mean, if you think about it, for Michigan was established as a thriving lumber industry. That's how Michigan towns were created. Saginaw is one of them. I mean, that lumber, if you do your research in the area, was exported, taken down the river and out, and that's what they did. And people got rich through it. I mean, people moved here, established towns because of the thriving lumber economy. But what happened? Well, time goes on and lumber there's only so many trees in the forest, starts getting used up. Well, Michigan makes a transition, this part of Michigan especially, to automotive. And at the turn of the century, we come into automotive, becoming the automotive capital of the world is right here. But in modern times now, in the year 2023, the booming automotive economy is just a fading memory of the past. It's no longer that way. It's still happening to a degree, but it's not what it used to be. So I think we can understand what it's like for the people Paul's writing this letter to. There are people that are like, we've known the really good times, and we know that, it's not the times are like horrible now, but they've been better. We could say they've been better. And that's where these people are at. And they're people who have established a church, and Paul is writing to this church, and he's telling them the priorities that a church should be focused on. Like what's important for a church to prioritize. And he's writing it to the people they call Colossians. They're people who lived in this town. And it's in Colossians chapter 4 that we're going to look. And Paul's trying to help them to watch out for hidden ulterior motives. And here's how he says this. Devote yourselves to prayer. Now, that's always a great place to start, but we can so quickly just go by that, like, well, yeah, duh, pray. What else? You expect the pastor to say. You expect the Paul to say, hey, devote yourselves to prayer. But he's saying more than just, because Paul knows us. He knows we're going to pray before we eat. He knows that that's like a habit. We're like, okay, everybody, close your eyes, pray. Hey, put your fork down. Okay, if you like my house, we're gonna pray first. Paul's saying more than that kind of prayer. He's saying more than the kind of prayer that you have when you're pleading to God in a crisis or when something's going wrong. You're like, Lord, help. He's saying devote yourselves to prayer, which what Paul is really saying here is an ongoing daily habit to do it more often. Being watchful and thankful. And pray for us too, that God may open a door for our message so that we may proclaim the mystery of Christ, for which I am in chains. Pray that I may proclaim it clearly as I should. Paul's in jail at this time. He's in prison. And so he's like, hey, pray for me too, because, it's not easy when you're trying to do everything I'm trying to do from jail. But Paul had an interesting perspective. He could have just stayed in jail and said, oh, God, where are you? What's going on? This isn't how I thought this was going to go. This is all just falling to pieces. I can't believe it. I can't go to the people and preach anymore, so I guess I'm done. I guess I'm retired. That's it. No, he got creative. He said, what can I do? How can I continue to preach despite being held here? I can write letters. Now, Paul had no idea that these letters would be saved and someday bound in a big book called the Bible. He had no idea. He was encouraging believers that he knew right now. Like, here are some things I need to tell you guys. This is what I believe God's prompting me to say to you. So I'm putting these words on paper and I'm sending them out to you guys. These are letters. But how amazing is it by Paul being creative and doing what he knew to do, that the words still speak to us to this day. And they're still relevant for us to this day. Verse 5, here's what he says. Be wise in the way you act toward outsiders. See, I didn't come up with the term outsiders. Paul did, so blame it on him. Outsiders. Yeah, I know it sounds it's not very sensitive, but it's the best word I can think of to say people that don't currently attend church. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. So what's he saying here? He's saying choose your words carefully. He's saying take time and make sure that how you say it is done well. I mean, how many of you ever heard somebody say, well, if you don't like it, it's just the truth. I say it like it is. And as much as they say that, it doesn't make it feel any better. It doesn't make you go, okay, that still stings and hurts. The way you said that just blew me across the room. If you said it a little bit differently, I would have received it a lot better. We've all been in that place. And that's what Paul's saying, I know, guys, I get it. We all have times where we just want to tell the world, hey, you're going to hell, and let me list the reasons why. And I'll put it on Facebook so you can see it in full color. Here's what you're doing wrong. If you don't vote for who I vote for, if you don't say the way I say it, and if you don't go to the places I go, it's easy to do that. I mean, but is that really preaching the good news? Is that really spreading Christ? It's not. Paul's saying, let your conversation be full of grace. In other words, give them a break. Because we were drawn to Christ because of grace in the first place. None of us would respond really well to a message that tells us, all the ways you're doing it wrong, and now get up and follow Christ. It's like, no, you're going to be like, hey, look, Jesus loves you. He loves you despite what's going on. It doesn't matter. He loves you anyways. Let me talk to you some more about that. That's how you start a conversation. And seasoned with salt. He's saying, yeah, put in the nice words. It's not being fake. It's being considerate. It's being full of grace. It's always making the most of the opportunity. You're taking the time, showing care and concern for someone else by saying it carefully. Pausing, let me just have a minute. Let me think about how I'm going to say this before I say it. Okay, now I'm going to say it. Saying it carefully. as if it's important, because I think it is. If we follow Paul's advice, if we apply this just right here, if we like splash this on the walls of our church, and if we say, okay, from now on, this is, like we're going to memorize it and all that kind of stuff, we would change the world. If we put it into practice, if we knew it so well that every day in our life, just us in this room did this in our workplace, in our families, in our neighbors, to our community around us, we would change our worlds that we live in. It would make a difference. And I know it seems far-fetched, because I said change the world. And some of you probably got caught up on it. Because you're like, come on, man. I mean, the world's a big place. Are we really going to make that big of a difference just by showing love and kindness to our enemies? It happened once, about 2,000 years ago. Just 12 people. I think it could happen again. And I have to confess with you that I do have an ulterior motive as your pastor, as when I am thinking about and I'm praying about what I'm going to teach on a Sunday morning, my ulterior motive, I've always got an ulterior motive. So I'm going to tell you what it is up front now, right here. I'm always teaching with the mindset of helping us to become more missional in the way we live our lives. And the reason I do that is because the hardest thing to help someone see is what they don't see. And then that's confusing, so let me say it a different way. If you don't realize you need help, it's hard for you to know you need help. I mean, we don't realize what we're doing. And so I'm always trying to help us to see it, because I myself am there just like you guys. We're more consumer-minded than we would like to admit. And if you think of the word consumer-minded, a consumer mindset, here's how I would say this. Consumer-minded, it's like saying, my church and God activities, they're scheduled in when I have time. My life revolves around me. Like I've got a busy life, I've got a busy schedule. And that's what consumer-minded is. Consumer-minded says, when I go to the movie theater, and there's nothing wrong with this, but when I go to the movie theater, I'm not going there with a thought of, I'm going to make sure I pick up the whole auditorium before I leave because, I want to be nice. No, your thought is, I paid my ticket, I came to see a movie, I paid for a service, and so when I get up and leave, someone else is going to come in and clean this auditorium. When I go to the grocery store and I buy groceries, I'm picking up my groceries and I'm getting my stuff, but I'm not going to restock the shelf when it looks like it's getting empty. That's someone else's job because I'm the consumer. So consumer-minded, don't take this the wrong way, but it just means I look at it as I'm the receiver, I'm not necessarily the giver. But Jesus taught a little bit differently. Jesus taught it as mission-minded. And mission-minded, my first priority is to love others and share Jesus Christ. My life revolves around this mission right here. But that takes a lot of intentionality to remember that. I will teach what Jesus Christ taught because my life is about serving, not being served. Even as your pastor, I'm going to tell you, I have to constantly remind myself that when I'm out in public, even if I'm just going to the grocery store or a movie, that it's easy for me to just want to get in and get out and get my, I've got things to do. I'm going to get my groceries in the cart. I'm going to get going. But when I'm going down the aisle and I see a lady who's having a hard time reaching something, do I keep going or do I stop and do I help? If I'm mission-minded, I'm going to stop and I'm going to help. I'm not just going to keep going. If I'm going into the store and I know I'm in a rush, do I stop and let them go first or do I go first? Mission-minded is forcing myself out of my routine and schedule and opening my eyes to the world around me and understanding that there's people around me who may need help today. It's the way a lot of EMT workers react and think automatically. I've talked to many of them and they'll say, I can't help myself. Like, well, I'll be eating lunch with them and they're constantly looking around the room and I'll say, look at me, what's going on? And they're like, I can't help it. I'm constantly looking around the room and if I see somebody who looks like they may be in trouble or getting ready to choke, I'm ready to spring to action to help them. Now, at first, I was a little put off because I'm like, hey, we're here to talk. It's you and me. But then it sunk in that, wait a second, it's like they never stop being an EMT. It's like they never punch out. It's like they're constantly on the job. Like they're constantly thinking, hey, I'm a doctor, for example. I'm always looking for, I can help somebody if somebody's going to die. I'm not just going to ignore them and tell them, oh, I'm not on the clock right now. Let me call somebody who can help. No, I'm going to help you. I mean, we would think that was absurd. But if we're not careful as Christians, we can almost say to ourselves, I'm still a Christian, but right now I'm dad and I got to get this mission accomplished. Or I'm mom and I got to get this done. I got my list. Or I'm at work and I'm just working. And we be careful. I don't ever want anybody to misunderstand me. I'm not saying that work, you should neglect your work and just preach Christ all day because you'll lose your job very quickly if you do that. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is you could do your job, and when you're being friendly and talking with people, you could be mindful to, instead of telling them all about my problems, I can listen a little more to what are your problems. That's what we're talking about today. It's looking at, instead of how can they help me, how can I help them? How can I be more of a witness? How can I help other people around me every day of my life? So now that I've defined the motives of Silver Creek Church, and I've helped you see some of the questions that can help ensure you choose a good, healthy church, it's time to turn up the heat on myself. It's time for me to step forward as my own whistleblower and tell you the truth about me. Because let's be honest, it's really hard to believe that somebody like me would do the job I'm doing, being a pastor, that seems to give up so much just to serve others. Because a pastor's job involves being available to members of the church 7 days a week for funerals, weddings, life crisis, whenever they arise. So who would choose to be a pastor, and what is their real motive? I mean, let's just be honest, come on. And I remember back in elementary school, remember in elementary school how they had career days, or they would say, what do you want to be when you grow up, little Johnny? I never heard a kid say, pastor. Never heard it once. It just wasn't on the list of, this is what I'm going to be when I grow up. Occasionally I might hear missionary, occasionally, because, that go off to a far off place or something, but never heard pastor. And when you get a little bit older, you get into high school, you have guidance counselors. I've never heard guidance counselors guiding kids towards, have you considered pastor? Look at the salary package of a pastor and look at you. They've never done that because it's not one of those attractive, make a lot of money if you do this. You can have big cars, swimming pools. No, that's not a big career choice if you're looking for those things in life. So why would people do it? Like, what's wrong with them? It makes you think there must be ulterior motives. And sometimes hearing and seeing the news about, like I said earlier, the misappropriation of funds or spending money in the wrong places really makes you wonder, like, are they really doing that? Or are they secretly taking money? Like, does Pastor Matt go to that black box and put a little in his pocket and a little in the church? Like, 2 for you, 2 for me. Like, what does he do, No, I don't do that. I don't touch that. That's one of the ways that there's accountability. I don't touch the money. So why would people do it? There must be something. Well, it's because there are people that are a little crazy, perhaps, that do have this mindset of there's more to life than the things that we look for. And planting a church is much more difficult than being hired to an existing church. I've done both now, and I can tell you with complete objectivity that it's difficult. Usually church planners will do fundraising for 2 years before they even launch a church. And that fundraising, part of the funds they raise is to compensate their salary for those 2 years so that they can still have like a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 salary, depending on what they set up for their church. That could be their salary for those years that they're applying the church before the church gets grown to a place on its feet where it can support the pastor through its self-giving. And with this church, circumstances changed while we were getting ready to plant it, and I had to pivot. If you know what pivoting means, I pivoted, and I chose to begin this ministry utilizing a savings account that Rachel and we had established. Like, here's the funny thing, is that before we started Silver Creek, for like 7 years, Rachel and I knew something was coming that required us to get very low in debt and build up a healthy savings account. We didn't know what it was. We just felt that. So we had been doing that. So we had built up a healthy savings account, very low in debt, to make it so that we were prepared for something like this to happen. And I thought, well, this must be how God wanted me to do it. So this is how we're going to do it. And it was wonderful. We launched. And then the 18 months go by, and none of us saw the pandemic coming. And now the church board had voted to give me a $250 a week, like a flat salary. So they've been doing that right along, and that's been helpful. And this is the amount the church can afford without being too overly burdened. Now, in time, that will probably increase as the church is able to do that. But currently, I work a part-time job to offset my income. That's how I'm able to keep this going. I put in 30 to 40 hours a week doing the church work to keep this church going. But then I fill in the other time with part-time to make up the salary, the money. And you wonder, okay, well, what's Matt's reason? And I do have a personal reason that I chose to continue, because I could have stopped. I could have quit. I could have said, well, this isn't working. I'm going to do something else. And you're going to have a hard time believing what my ulterior motive is. It's not money. It's not. Because I could take much more money and go work for another church right now. I'm very hireable with my experience, very hireable. There's even been churches who sort of got the word out that if I was ever looking, they would love to hire me. So I could do that very quickly if I wanted to. I could make very good money doing that. But there's something stopping me from doing that. It's because God called me to do what I'm doing. And a calling is an overwhelming urge to do something because you know that if you don't, you won't be happy doing anything else. Like, I'll be miserable if I do anything else. That's why I love being the pastor of this church. That's why, despite the circumstances or the things you might look at and go, oh, gee, that must be more difficult than some other pastors have it, I'm okay with it. I am longing for the day that I can stop working my second job and just do the church. I would love for that because my heart is here with Silver Creek Church. My heart wants to nothing gets me more excited than the idea of just being able to devote more time to you guys and to this church and to the community and doing things to improve what we do in the community. I would love to do that. But to keep doing what I'm doing, just like you guys, I've got to say no sometimes to the easier options that come to mind, to the temptations that come to mind. For some of you guys, those temptations might be, well, let's just not go to church. Let's just stay home. Those other thoughts could be, well, let's not participate in that. Or, let's go somewhere else where it's bigger and there's more things established. Those are easier options for a lot of us that we face on a regular basis. And I'm only telling you this because I want you to know my true ulterior motive inside. I want you to know what really drives me to do what I do. It's why I continue planting a church 2 years past what we anticipated it would take to plant it. It's because I'm still growing as a pastor. First of all, I'm growing all the time into my calling. But I'm on a journey to become more like Jesus. And on that journey, I don't have the map. I don't know where that journey is going to take me a year from now or 2 years from now. But I trust God in the process. And I know that he's going to take us exactly where we need to be, when we need to be there. So I promise you, my only motive is for Jesus Christ to be known and to make him known in this community. That's why I do what I do. Jesus invites us all, in fact, to give up parts of ourselves or parts of our options to follow his option instead. It may not, if you're like me, we all wish we could just get the map. Can I just take a peek? Can I look at one page? Can I see what's going to come next year? What's around the corner? Am I going to get through this? Or you've been praying for something. When is my prayer going to be answered? And Jesus invites us to just follow him without knowing all those details. Just follow. And we got to trust him in the process. You don't have to give everything up to follow Jesus. You just have to give up the one thing he's asking you to give up. It's usually just one thing. It's funny that way. It's usually just one thing that we feel like, I know in my heart of hearts that if I would stop doing that, or if I could start doing that, that it's probably what God wants me to do, but man, it's scary. Oh, it freaks me out. The thought of it, it's like, and I could give you a list of what ifs. If I do this, here's what could happen. We might not have enough for this. We might not be able to do that. But everything that we give up to follow him, it's amazing that somehow we have more after we've given up something. I saw a movie recently, shocker, and it was the story of Phil Robertson from the Duck Dynasty television show and all that stuff. He called The Blind, and so I went and saw it with my daughter this week. And I love how they phrased, well, how they talked about the moment when he accepted Christ in his heart. The pastor that was talking to him put it this way. I love how he said it. He said, how do I do this? How do I become a Christian? How do I accept Christ in my heart? And the pastor said to him, well, you have to die. To which he was like, why? You don't expect that. But symbolically, you have to let your old life die so a new life can be born again. And when you're baptized, that is the symbolic representation of your old life being left behind under the water and a new life emerging. And I love the way that was said because it's so true that when I allow something of myself to die, to just let it go, it's letting it go. Somehow, God brings so much more than I could have ever dreamed of in its place. But you can't see it until you let it go. It's like you don't get the choice of, okay, well, here's what it's not what's behind curtain number 2. It's like, well, what's behind the curtain? I want to know. Nope, you don't get to know what's behind the curtain. Are you willing to give it up? It's a simple thing. But life is always better with Jesus. Always. So, the funny thing is, although I've given up a lot, some people might say, I don't say it, but some people might say to do what I'm doing now, I've found that I've had more than enough finances to live my life. In fact, enough to be able to help other people at times. And I've found that God has given me an amazing group of people to call family and to call friends and to experience this life with that we call Silver Creek Church. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And I'm excited to see what God's going to do in the coming days for all of us. So, if you're searching for a healthy church, I invite you to check us out here at Silver Creek Church. We will continue to question our methods, but we will never question the author. Can I pray? Heavenly Father, I thank you for the opportunity we had to gather today as a church. And I pray, Lord, that whatever you're speaking to us on our hearts, that one thing that we feel like, maybe we've talked about it so many times, I don't want to talk about it again. Maybe I've thought about it so many times, but is it really possible? Could I really follow through and do that? It's scary, but Lord, will you give us the courage to try once more? To give up whatever that is that we need to give up, to surrender whatever we need to surrender, to start doing whatever we need to start doing, to stop doing whatever we need to stop doing. Help us, Father, to take that step closer to you, because when we do, true life is experienced of peace and freedom in you, living life your way instead of our way. Thank you, God, for this day. Thank you for what you're doing in all of our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.